From East End pawn kings to South American bank robbers, some of football's biggest clubs have been run by absolute wrong-uns.
Because you're a buffoon at times, Lawrence.
Simon!
They burned down stadiums, smuggled cocaine, and started themselves up front for Crunch Cup ties. He did what you or I would do. He formed a violent rebel militia. Meet football's craziest owners. My name is Jack. Zach is here as ever.
Hello, Jack.
Hello. And we've got possibly our most legit guest ever. It's Kieran Maguire.
Thanks very much for the invite, chaps.
Yeah, Kieran bulked it legit there. But the reason I say that, so you're the host of Price of Football podcast, very famous podcast, and a football finance expert.
Not according to the people that don't like me. I can assure you, I've received WhatsApp messages from journalists saying such and such head of such and such a club has called you less than expert.
Yeah. Sorry, in the eyes of those people, you're some twat with a podcast, I guess. But
Yes.
You are a professor at football.
Join the club.
I do it at I do it for a full-time job. Yes,
At Liverpool University.
at Liverpool University, and I also teach for the Professional Footballers Association. So I've been teaching in the last year or so Jordan Henderson, Ilkay Gundogan, Ben Davis, Robbie Fowler.
I can imagine Robbie Fowler's back of the class, paper aeroplanes, chewing gum, shouting out. Jordan Henderson, the nerd. He's the nerd, right?
Teacher's pet.
Yeah.
They're both brilliant students. Robbie was completely committed, and it was great to see him graduate as well, because he's known in Liverpool as God.
Yeah.
So we can actually say God graduates today.
So we're going to talk today, I guess, about more of the sort of salacious side. We are going to talk a bit about, how the financial side can kind of unwind quite quickly into disaster. But, we're going to be talking about some very colourful characters. I guess, some people think that the colourful characters have gone out of the game a bit. The era of, your Elton Johns and your Delia Smiths seems to be coming to an end.
Certainly the traditional celebrity, but we've got Ipswich Town.
Sheeran.
Yeah, Ed Sheeran. So
Yeah.
he's been sponsoring their shirts, and he's a genuine fan. I'm aware of the clubs which are being run, and unfortunately I can't tell you the details, which are involved in money laundering, for example, and connections with organised crime, and all of
Are there
this.
some that are doing it?
There are some, yes.
How high up in the pyramid are we talking?
Well, that's for another discussion.
Sounds high. Okay, so we're going to talk about specific owners who have had really funny stories. There are quite a few colourful ones in the Premier League at the moment, right? There's your Dan Levy's, your Marinakis, Todd Bowley, till recently Mike Ashley. We're not going to be talking about them because many of them we've done there an episode. We've talked about at length. We're also not going to talk about Silvio Berlusconi because he is going to get his own episode.
He's getting a three-parter, I think. Berlusconi.
So we thought we'd save him. But yeah, you can listen to our episodes on Todd Bowley or Mike Ashley if you want to delve into those. The one Dan Levy story I did really like is, he's meant to be the most difficult negotiator.
Yes.
And Alex Ferguson said buying Berbatov from him was more painful than my hip replacement.
Yes.
And there's that amazing story, I think we've told it before, that when Modric went to Tottenham, the Dinamo Zagreb owner said to Levy, look, I would love a few Tottenham shirts with Modric's name on them, just as a sort of keepsake. And when the invoice came through for the transfer, Levy had deducted the cost of the shirts from the transfer fee.
Off the 40 million.
Yeah.
It's 150 quid is off the shirts.
Yeah, it's great. But anyway, should we get into it?
Let's roll.
I thought we'd start. I'd take us back to the relatively recent past, May 2010, when, at the time, Chelsea were riding high on Abramovich's rubles, and Abu Dhabi, they were pulling up a chair at the top table with Man City. And at the time, you probably all remember, fans everywhere were dreaming of getting a billionaire sugar daddy of their own. So Cardiff fans could not believe their luck when the eccentric Malaysian billionaire Vincent Tan rode into town. There was a lot of excitement. He clearly was very wealthy. I think he had the look as well. He looked a bit like a Bond villain.
It's the leather gloves that
Very
do this to me.
sinister.
No fingerprints.
Yeah, exactly. Leather glove implies hitman to me. Certainly something sinister about it.
Hitman or chauffeur. It's one or the
It
other.
does look a bit, because he's in a suit. Yeah. It does look a bit chauffeur as well. But yeah, I think he looked the part, and initially it was all quite promising. They got to the League Cup final quite early on, and within 3 years of him taking over, they were promoted to the Premier League. So it was, there was a lot of optimism until Vincent dropped a bombshell. He changed their famous blue-coloured kit to red and black. And he also changed their crest, so they were bluebirds. So they had a bluebird on the crest. They'd had this kit and this crest for 115 years, but Vincent turned up and he changed the crest to a Welsh dragon. So the idea was to cater to Asian markets, I think. 'Cause the colour red and dragons obviously very popular.
I mean, that's worked for Wrexham, isn't it?
In a way,
I think he was onto something looking
he was
back.
ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I think Wrexham already had a red shirt, so it was slightly less controversial there, to be fair.
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, changing a team's crest and kit colour in basketball, you could do that.
Yeah.
But I think
presumably nickname as well. Like, you can't be going around calling yourself the Bluebirds with a red shirt.
Yeah, did they change the nickname? I don't remember. The Dragons.
Nickname's not really an official thing anyway, is it?
No, but I mean, under the proposals for the independent regulator, that's one of the things which fans will be able to veto if club owners try to do that.
Oh, really?
And that probably is on the back.
Yeah,
of
that's the Vincent Tan rule.
story. Yes, yes.
Is the regular list of regulations? Is just going to be a lot of stuff that relates to like one
specific.
You can't down a pint in the stands topless if you're called Mike Ashley. Todd Bowley can't pick 12-man lineups. Because it is quite just sort of responding to 15 years of excess, isn't it?
That's right. It'll be similar to you can't move where the club plays. That's also known as the MK Dons rule.
Oh, right, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, Cardiff fans weren't happy about all these changes. It went down about as well as a string of rancid Glamorgan sausages in Cardiff. But then things started to get really weird. So Tan called together all the key execs in the club and ordered them to sign some players who had the number 8 in their date of birth. Because it's lucky in a lot of Asian cultures, including Malaysia, the number 8 is very, very important. So at that point, he's sort of turning the club into like a theme park aimed at the Asian market, I think. Just like lots of gimmicks.
Yeah.
Again, quite ahead of its time. Like Wrexham's not a million miles.
I guess if you just introduce a policy of only buying players that are born in the 80s, you just get a sort of team of veterans.
I was looking for a player born on the 8th of August 1988, and there is a Brazilian called Ricardinho. Did not go to Cardiff, but surely they should have bought him just to appease the owner.
Lost opportunity.
Yeah, huge. They did buy Chilean nutter Gary Medel, who's born in August. So he ticked that box. And he was actually pretty good for them, if you recall. But anyway, you can imagine the execs are pretty perplexed by their new owner just telling everyone to pick the team based on their date of birth. And his meddling did not stop there. So they're up in the Premier League at this point, and it's not going very well. I'm sure we all remember under Malky Mackay, they sunk to the bottom of the Premier League table where they stayed for a lot of the season. They had the second lowest total of goals scored. And so there was a lot of chat among the pundits of what Cardiff needed goals, and there was speculation about who was to blame. Was it the manager? Was Peter Odemwingie not doing quite enough? Maybe new signing Andreas Cornelius was a mistake. But Vincent identified a different culprit. He looked down the list of players and saw who on the squad hadn't scored any goals, and he blamed goalkeeper David Marshall, who, to be fair, he hadn't scored all season. So apparently, again, this is like a sort of meeting with the club execs and the manager, and Vincent Tan's just demanded to know why the fullbacks hadn't scored, and everyone was like, oh, that's not necessarily their role. And then apparently he wanted David Marshall out. No assists either.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you can imagine the club exec's response to Vincent Tan asking why the keeper hadn't scored. I don't think he's that clueless about football that he doesn't know that. You know what I mean? Even my friends with the most minuscule knowledge of football know that a goalkeeper doesn't score goals, right?
But one would hope so.
I think you ask people on the street, genuinely 99 out of 100 would know that.
Yeah. Do you think it's just a power move? It's in his sort of like Bond villain character that he feels like he could just go in and just click his fingers and get rid of someone for whatever reason he wants.
Keep them on their toes.
Yeah.
I think maybe he didn't know David Marshall was a keeper and he was looking down the squad list and just thought he was just any player.
Perhaps he didn't have the number 1 jersey.
Yeah.
Because sometimes keepers will have a
that's
13 or a 14.
I quite like that. I quite like it when they wear like 38 or, and like sort of late 90s, there was a bit of that. Like all the Chelsea squad were wearing like 42. And, it's a bit disorganised. I like it. Anyway, speaking of disorganised, at this point, Vincent decides to take matters into his own hands. So he sacks the head of recruitment at the club and brings in a little-known 23-year-old Kazakh fella called Alisher Absalyamov, who, to be fair to him, had worked at the club already because he painted the walls of the stadium quite recently. That was his only experience of football. So I guess he was a sort of puppet, was the idea. Apparently they turned out to be friends. How common is that sort of thing?
It's an interesting management strategy. I teach at business school, and we look at different strategies, and this one is sort of throwing
the
a bomb.
puppet exec.
Yes.
But there must be a bit of that where someone just wants like their insider who's sort of... Mike Ashley did it a bit, didn't he?
What, with Dennis Wise?
Yeah, Dennis Wise and Derek... Was it Derek Lambias who he met at a casino? Lambias was the manager of the casino. He liked him so much he hired him to run Newcastle. So I think that was sort of his style.
Yeah, I mean, probably anybody with any sort of actual football experience lost a bit of faith in him after he turned on David Marshall. So then maybe the painter and decorator was the only one who... Yeah,
I like the idea. They weren't friends before, but he was just sort of wandering around the stadium and got chatting to the guy painting the walls and was like, "You agree with me, don't you?" The guy's like, "Yeah, yes, Mr. Tan. You're hired, kid." Anyway, unfortunately, Alisher didn't last long. He was there for a few weeks as head of recruitment and then stepped down, officially for visa reasons. Not sure the exact reason. Needless to say, Cardiff are relegated, and down they go to the Championship, where... fans are pretty hard on the team by this point, and they're often seen booing the players after poor results. And Vincent starts joining in, actually. So we're looking at a picture of him here. The TV coverage, this was while they were in Championship, the TV coverage cut to Vincent Tan, who was in the now famous red strip, booing.
So they did actually have the red kit for...
Yeah, a few seasons.
For a few seasons.
Maybe like 5. Yeah, so you can see the red dragon.
Yeah.
Again, he's looking quite... Because the collar of his shirt is over the football shirt.
Yeah.
It's again looking quite chauffeur, I think. Sort of like, minibus driver for the team. They've given him a shirt. But yeah, he was
Do you think those shirts are collectible among Cardiff fans now, or do you think they torch them?
I think on eBay, they could be a collector's item, for all we know. So quite often you talk to fans, I think Derby County fans, the season when they went down with the lowest ever points, that shirt has become very iconic because it was very much a "I was there" moment. So that's the sort of the gallows humour of football fans.
Do you think Southampton you're going to see similar this season?
Well, they've not got many games to go, but their kit's pretty grubber. It's not a nice looking kit this year, is it?
At the time of recording, they're on 10 points. I think the season might be over by the time this comes out, but certainly Southampton's season. But I did notice still a lot of fans are there, supporting the players. So that must be a bit of an I was there.
Yeah, the nature of football fandom is what's the alternative on a Saturday afternoon? It's so hardwired into you. I've watched Brighton when they've been relegated in the past with 5 or 6 games ago, and the alternative is, I might go and spend time with the family. So I'll go. Just to
what am I
going
to talk to them about?
Who are you?
Anyway, so the Cardiff sink back to the Championship, where things are sort of okay for a bit, and they do actually have a second stint in the Premier League under Neil Warnock. He brings them up, doesn't he?
Yep.
Again, they're down again pretty quickly, I think, at the first opportunity. But Vincent Tan is still there today. I sort of thought he'd gone.
No, and he's put an awful lot of money into the club because Cardiff, like the vast majority of Championship clubs, are losing normally in the region of 15 to 20 million pounds a year. So you've got this long list of owners who are being abused left, right, and centre by the fans. And yet, every week, every month, the chief executive phones them up, and somewhere or somehow they manage to find the money, unless they don't find the money, which has happened recently with Sheffield Wednesday, for example, who are owned by the son of Thailand's biggest tuna canning.
Oh, really?
Organisation.
Big tuna.
Yes.
To be fair, so yeah, Vincent Tan's still around. I think he's probably pumped in like 150 million at this point, which is he writes off the debt all the time. And he did revert the kit in, I think, 2015 back to the famous blue, and he's admitted that it was a mistake, which is good of him. He is still fairly mental, so I had a quick check-in, and last year he told the BBC, "In every match, I want to see 30 or 40 attempts on goal. The law of averages says the more you shoot, the more you'll score. If you shoot 30 times, you'll get 3 goals. 40 will be 4 goals. 50 will be 5 goals."
David Marshall was just banging it in from all over it now.
Now he started taking shots.
Yeah. I think for the next one, take us back to the 90s when being taken over by a Malaysian billionaire was probably sounded like a bit of a fever dream for most Football League clubs. But even by those standards, Doncaster Rovers really got the short straw when Ken Richardson took over in 1993. So Ken was seriously crooked. 10 years earlier, he'd been banned from horse racing and given a suspended prison sentence for fraud. So basically, he'd entered this quite experienced horse under a fake name in a race for beginner horses, like under 2 years. And it won by like 20 lengths. So he got banned from horse racing for that and decided to get into football. So took over Doncaster in 93. They were in the 3rd division then. And he promised Premier League football within 5 years. But spoiler alert, didn't happen because he was an unbelievably chaotic owner. So he was just burning through managers, partly because he insisted on picking the teams and directing substitutions from the stands.
How?
Walkie-talkie,
Yeah,
I guess, yeah. There was one time a manager turned up to a match to discover that he'd been sacked and replaced. And apparently the replacement manager had been introduced to the players an hour before kickoff. And obviously, like any kind of manager worth their money is going to run a mile from that club. So he ends up hiring this one guy whose only football experience was doing door-to-door sales for the Stockport County Club Lottery. It doesn't work out. Ken actually puts himself in charge of the team for a few matches when he can't find anybody else. But very quickly, the fans are turning on him. There are pitch invasions, massive protests through Doncaster, and he starts getting really paranoid about this. So one fan recalled this time that Ken invited him to come and sit with him in the director's box and point out the sections of supporters that were conspiring against him.
What's he going to do to disappear them?
Yeah.
Didn't Flavio Briatore, when he bought QPR with some others, the colourful F1 character Flavio Briatore, and there's an amazing documentary about it called 4-Year Plan.
Yeah,
it's on YouTube, I think, and there's a bit where all the fans are booing and chanting like his name against him, and he just turns to one of his underlings and goes, "Give me the names of the ones booing me, or I'll sell the club."
So, I hate to break it to you, but it's all of them.
How many names do you want?
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, the supporters might have been onto something because Ken was running them into the ground, really. And to be fair, they'd been a little bit suspicious very early on. So a few months after buying the club, he placed an advert for the club's stadium in the Daily Telegraph. Said there would be a great site for a retail park or a hotel. So yeah, maybe not invested too much in the long term. Doesn't find a buyer for the stadium. And then in 1995, a mysterious fire breaks out in the main stand, takes the roof off. And obviously this causes a big stir in the local press. And the following day, a journalist bumps into Ken outside the ground and asks him if he can have a look around and see the press room, which is supposedly where the fire started. And Ken replied to him saying, "Well, you can have a look around, but I'm not going in because I could leave some forensic evidence. They might try and blame it on me."
Should have gone in.
Which, yeah, it's a bit of a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he had reason to be wary because it turned out he'd hired an ex-SAS man to torch the stadium and then claim it on the insurance.
Love it. That's probably too high profile a building to burn down for insurance reasons.
Yeah. And I don't know if he should have had that much faith in the guy because the arsonist accidentally left his phone at the scene and the police found the phone and on it was a message to Ken that read, "Job done." Which, yeah, talk about being caught red-handed.
You sure you're in the SAS? Is this just a bloke he's met in the pub who's been like, I was in the SAS? Yeah, of course you were.
Had trials at Crystal Palace as well. Yeah.
I could burn it down for you. If you did. Job done. It's like, mate, I know job done. I can see a plume of smoke rising over the whole city.
Yeah. It's a bit of a slam dunk for the police. So Ken is jailed for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And the fans celebrated by hanging an effigy of him outside the club car park entrance.
Well, like with a noose. It's a bit much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got your insurance payout.
They got them relegated from the Football League as well.
Was the stadium a write-off or
No, so it was only one stand, and it was sort of the middle section of it. It wasn't even that much of a good arsonist, really.
shock? God, best man on the job.
Yeah.
So it didn't get turned into like a PC World or whatever.
No, as far as I know, they've still got the stadium. I don't actually.
At this point, does
actually
Ken
know
Richardson then
materials.
have to offload the club?
So he does sell the club eventually. They get relegated. Fans turn on him, burns the ground down.
All the usual.
And yeah, before he goes to jail, he's already shifted the club on to some other unfortunate soul. Actually, on the subject of trying to destroy a club, got a story for you about Stoila Manilov, who was the president of a Bulgarian top flight side called Sasko Selo. And a few years ago, it was the final day of the season, and the game was tied at 1-1, and they're facing relegation when they get a penalty in the last minute of stoppage time. So if they score, then they'll stay up. And up steps striker Yusufa Yaffa to take the penalty, at which point Manilov storms onto the pitch, grabs Yusufa and insists that another guy takes it. Actually got a clip of it here.
Юсуфа Яфа, че няма той да е изпълнителя на дуспата, сега пък ще се наложи на стюардите. От страна на Мартин Кавдански, а пък край страничната линия. Едва ли се изигра повече от една максимум.
He's missed it. That's an absolutely terrible penalty.
Honestly, the guy who does eventually take it takes one of the worst penalties I've ever seen. And they were relegated.
He's not even really kicked the ball properly.
Yeah.
And down they went.
So down they went, and then the following day, Manilov liquidated the club.
Sort of like burning the stadium down, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kind of respect that. Was that like a club with like 120 years history?
No, so in fairness to him, he'd founded the club in 2015 or 2016 and had taken them from like the third division to the top division. This was their first season in the top flight, and lost. And they no longer
It's
exist.
basically the millionaire version of taking your ball and going home.
Yeah.
Just packing up the whole club.
Yeah.
You almost know watching the clip, as soon as he's dragged one taker away, he's going to miss that penalty.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on the guy who did it. In a similar vein, Evren Ozbey, who's the president of a Turkish side called Akhisarspor, and he online, who's scrolling through Twitter one day and saw a photo of 8 of his players eating baklava with one of his rivals.
He's like feeding it into their mouths, though.
Yeah, it's quite a strange photo.
When you say one of his rivals,
It's the owner of a rival club.
I see.
Which it is a strange situation.
That's a betrayal.
It's quite,
it's quite flirty
Quite
the way they're
flirty,
eating
really,
the baklava. They're like being fed it.
And everybody's got their own special recipe for baklava
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
So,
Maybe that's it.
It's like insulting on his
it
recipe
is,
as well.
exactly. Yeah, I would be mortified.
Yeah, and in Turkey, food and hospitality is an important part of the culture.
Yeah. Well, he was definitely slighted by it because the following day he banned all 8 players from the club.
And rightly so. Fraternising with the enemy like that.
Yeah.
What were they doing? Why are they eating?
I actually don't know the backstory of the photo, but it's something quite erotic about the way he's like planting his home-baked baklava into his mouth.
I certainly think so. Yeah, I'm glad they were banned.
They deserved it. Really. Yeah.
I think
I'm not sure the manager agreed when he then had to put out a team of like 9 players the following week.
Yeah, it's one of the most unusual reasons to be unavailable for a match. Suspended baklava. I think that coming back to the Ken Richardson story, there's something slightly romantic about those kind of owners. Do you think? Like, it's like a world we've lost a bit of, like the 90s wide boy, con man.
You could see it on an episode of The Sweeney or something.
Yeah.
The professionals.
Do they make him like that anymore? Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah. It's kind of like now it's not romantic when your club gets taken over by an American hedge fund or like a state investment fund.
Even like, the whole, like, he picks himself as manager for a bit. It kind of, like the era of, there's Barry Fry, who was sort of chairman / manager at times. I think, where was he? Peterborough.
Yeah.
There's that documentary about him and they show him doing transfer negotiations and like, this is how it was done back then.
Next on his wanted list, the Wickham striker, Miguel de Souza.
How are you, mate?
All right, Bass.
Hope your goals don't put us down. Hello, mate. How are you?
He's in for some hard bargaining.
Who's talking, your man?
Yeah. I think really we're looking at 850, 950 and 1050.
No. You ain't gonna get that. Fucking hell, you sure? You ain't gonna get that. I'm desperate for you, but I couldn't go nowhere near that. First year, 550. Second year, 6. Third year, 650. Plus 10 grand for 30 goals. All competitions. Each season.
Supposing you have a survival bonus. Love that. Survival bonus. That's a new one.
I fucking love it. How much?
We got 8 games.
Yeah. How much?
10 grand.
How much?
10.
How much?
10. It's got to be money well spent.
It is. 5. So that's your only sticking point. Done. Welcome aboard, my man.
Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. Thank you, young man.
Right.
So to the fat bastard in the blue blazer! Great, mate. Thanks a lot.
We are now heading to the small South American nation of Suriname to meet a very flamboyant character by the name of Ronnie Brunswick. So Ronnie Brunswick, he'd had an unusual route to football. He had served in the army and assisted in a coup which brought a military dictator to power called Desi Bouterse. This is in the early 80s. And he then served as Bouterse's personal bodyguard until one year he had the audacity to ask for a raise in his salary and was promptly sacked for his insolence. And so, having lost his job and been turned down for a pay rise, he did what you or I would do. He formed a violent rebel militia called the Surinamese Liberation Army and fought a bloody civil war against the National Army. There's some nuance in that I haven't really covered in Ronnie's defence. But yeah, he fights this really intense guerrilla war for a number of years. And during this time, obviously, you've got to raise funds for your rebel army. He starts robbing banks, which among his supporters earns him the nickname of the Robin Hood of Suriname, because they say he was very good at liberating stolen funds from the government and returning them to the people. I don't know if there's a different side to that. What I do know is around this time, he's also convicted of trafficking cocaine into the Netherlands. But this is conviction in absence. He's safely in Suriname, where he's happily fathering 50 children.
50 children?
Probably we talk a lot about people's haul on that front. I don't think I've ever heard of 50.
Elon Musk would be impressed by that.
Yeah, he's getting there, to be fair, Elon. He's working on it. Isn't it Dennis Rodman's dad, who amazingly is called Philander?
Oh, yeah.
He's fathered sort of 25, I think, but 50, that's rebel leader
While
numbers.
also running a rebel militia.
And shifting coke. Yeah. How have you got the energy? Anyway, amid all this excitement, Ronnie also found time to buy his local club, who are called Inter Moengotapo, and he builds them a stadium. It's a similar story to some of the ones we've heard. The stadium is called the Ronnie Brunswick Stadium, of course. And I mean, fair enough, he built it. So I think he's pretty popular there, where he's this very colourful owner and leader. But he does get into the odd controversy, notably in 2005, when he's banned by the Surinamese FA for coming onto the pitch and threatening players with a gun.
It's quite brave to ban him, really.
Yeah.
A militia leader who's got fighting a cocaine trafficking allegation and is a known bank robber.
Yeah, do you reckon they're enforcing that ban on maybe on away fixtures? I don't know if they're coming to the Ronnie Brunswick Stadium to enforce it. It carries on, though. In 2012, he's banned again for being violent to a referee. Don't know the specifics of that one. But despite all those controversies, the voters of Suriname are behind him. And in 2020, he is elected vice president of the country. So he's reached what I thought was the pinnacle of his political career until the following year when Inter qualify for the CONCACAF Champions League, which is a pretty big deal. This is like the Europa League of Central and North America and Caribbean.
Yeah.
So there's some pretty big teams playing in it. And among them are Olympia, the Honduran giants, who have won the competition before. They're a big player in that part of the world. And Inter draw them in their knockout fixture. So it's a huge moment. It's the biggest game of Inter Moncatapo's history. And, fans are piling into the stadium early on in the day. All the locals are eagerly tuning in to watch the game. And when they flick on the telly, they discover that the manager has selected a new striker for this important fixture. And there on their screens is this new striker taking the kickoff. It's the 61-year-old owner, Ronnie Brunswick, kicking off.
Fine figure of a man.
Fine figure of it. That's what an athlete looks like. He looks quite statuesque in some ways. The look on his
I
face.
suspect he didn't move very much. That's why.
No. Well, he did take all the kickoffs. And there were plenty of them because they lost 6-0. So that's busy work, actually. And he played a full hour until he was replaced by his son, Damien. Which I was thinking, must be quite a hard pick because he's got 50 kids.
Yeah.
I don't know how Damien wormed his way
Do you
into
think
the top.
so? He started the match and then they didn't even take him off at half time. Can you imagine the other players sitting around in the dressing room, just like, are you going to ask him? Can someone please just to get him off?
I kind of picture him being like, come on, guys, I'm doing all the work here. I've taken all the kickoffs. I did see some footage where he's sort of jogging. Anyway, 6-0. And after the match, he very kindly visited the Olympia dressing room where we got video of what he got up to. He's dishing out $100 bills to each player. Which I don't think, given that Olympia won 6-0, it's not like a bribe. I think it's just like
just a thank you, bro.
Yeah, I think he's sort of kindly uncle.
You made it.
Like
you made a bank
quid.
robber's dreams come true.
Yeah. He's really dishing out the banknotes.
I kind of respect it.
Same. Love
Just
it.
like, when else are you going to get the chance to play in a CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinal?
Yeah, I think this was his only chance because he missed the second leg because he can't leave Suriname due to an Interpol notice. He's wanted in most jurisdictions. So yeah, that was his only shot and he took it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite nice to see a bit of that sometimes.
Yeah.
I've seen a few other stories like that. There was a guy in China called He Shihua who he bought the club. He was in his 30s and he picked himself for like several crunch games. And then I think they went down and I looked them up and they don't really exist anymore. Someone else owns their team and has renamed it. So yeah, it's not normally a path to success.
Yeah. So from those exotic climes, I'm going to take us back to the sort of spiritual home, the spawning ground of wide boy businessmen, the East End of London. So West Ham have been owned by David Gold and David Sullivan since 2010 until David Gold died, sadly, a few years ago. And Gold, he's proper East End, or he was proper East End. So his dad was a famous East End criminal called Goldie, and he spent David's childhood in jail after a botched heist. So he was the getaway driver for a gang who hijacked a barge from the Thames that was filled with 75 grams worth of copper ingots. It's a crime you don't hear about anymore, really.
Yes, that's old school. That's a Michael Caine film.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't end too well because he fell asleep in his getaway lorry and was found by the police asleep at the wheel. So he goes to jail for a lot of David's childhood, does eventually get out, although David might have wished that he didn't, because in 1972, he catches his dad stealing shares from his company, which is a bad day at the office. And it gets even worse when he comes home and finds his best mate shagging his wife in his swimming pool.
On the same day.
So both Gold and Sullivan, Sullivan's actually from Cardiff, not the East End, but both of them started up by flogging porn for a living. So Sullivan started by doing mail order softcore porn. So posting out nudes, basically, not of him. Fortunately. Don't know how many of those he would have sold. But it goes well. And he then gets into sex shops, magazines, becomes a millionaire by the time he's 25.
Well, I ended up working for David Sullivan when I graduated in 1983 during the sort of the Thatcher years. Don't do politics, me, but the economy wasn't doing its best at that time, so I was desperate for work. And a mate of mine ran one of the sex shops of David Sullivan in Brighton,
Wow.
and he was going off to a kibbutz for the summer. So he said, "Will you take over from me?" So I did. I'd never even had a girlfriend at that age. So there I was, manager of this sex shop. And I, with a name like mine, I come from a big Catholic family, as you can imagine. So I couldn't tell me mum. So each day, I'm going off to the cricket, or I'm off looking for work, mum, or I'm signing on, giving all these excuses. And I was being paid £150 a week, which was absolutely brilliant. And my mum started to get more and more suspicious. So I ended up having to give up the job, which I loved. It was a great job. And it's one of those jobs where you never have to give refunds. Because if you think about it, there was something in those days called the Chartham method, which they used to advertise in all of David's magazines, which was one of these penis extending devices. And who's going to go and complain? Except, so we used it. And one of the times I was there, I was in the shop, this guy comes in, and a couple of working girls had popped in for a cup of tea and to pick up various bits and pieces. And this guy came in with a complete straight face to me and said, "You sold me this penis extending machine. It doesn't work." Of course it didn't work. Yeah, it was complete crap. But it was about 20 quid at the time. So I go, "Well, it's been used. I can't give you a refund. And how do I know it's not worked?" He says, and one of the girls came out and said, "What's going on here?" And he told her, and he was really angry about it. She says, "Oh, go on, love, drop your trousers." So he does, and she turns to me and she says, "Give him the refund." Poor sod.
That's where it all began. Did I suppose David Sullivan never popped in?
No. He was. I think he was very successful
Yeah.
there. Both him and David. They've done very well, and they bought West Ham from an Icelandic bank which had gone bust in the 2000s. So they did actually rescue West Ham. And I know they're not popular with the fan base, but at the time there was a genuine danger of West Ham struggling to survive.
Yeah. Well, they were definitely popular with the pervy men of the 70s as well. So in his sort of 70s pomp, Sullivan had 150 sex shops, controlled 50% of porn magazines in the UK and 80% of the mail order trade. So it was absolute porn baron.
It cornered the market.
Yeah. He did really well. And then got into producing his own films as well.
When you say his own, he's not in them, is he?
He was not in there, but his girlfriend was. And did that for a few years. It actually ended up landing him with 71 days in jail because he's convicted of living off the immoral earnings of prostitutes, aka being a pimp. It sounds very much like. Should say he does appeal it and get released.
Can you imagine being convicted for living off the moral earnings of prostitutes? They might have a sideline. They might be doing a bit of knitting and selling mail order stuff. And
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what he was doing anyway, right? Before with the sex shops and mail order stuff. Yeah. He does then later get into football with David Gold, his business partner. So they owned Birmingham for 16 years in the 90s and 2000s. And then West Ham, like you said, they bought in 2010. And it's been an up and down period for them. Obviously, they oversaw the move to the Olympic Stadium, which everyone could agree was an excellent idea. I saw a stat the other day that under David Gold and David Sullivan's ownership, West Ham signed 50 strikers and 20 of them failed to score a single goal.
I still think overall they've done quite well. I mean, they won the Conference League. And West Ham have been...
They've been relegated under them though as well, I'm pretty sure. True. My other favourite moment from their reign was in 2021 when Sullivan appointed his then wife Emma Benton Hughes onto the board at West Ham. So we're looking at a picture of them now. He looks very much like a Eastern European despot.
He really does.
It's like a sort of Belarusian
he's got like
war criminal.
Yeah,
he looks constipated there.
Yeah, he does.
Connoisseurs of British smut will, of course, know Emma Benton Hughes from her stage name, Eve Vorley. which you might recognise from classics including Lesbian Student Nurses and Jack's favourite, Electric Blue Nude Wives Private Parts.
Is that all one title?
It's just one title, yeah. It's quite. You sort of got 3 titles in there.
Is there a Nude Wives that's not Private Parts? That's like
Nude Wives,
clothes?
just the
Feet,
the PG version.
hands. Is she quite a big name in the?
She was big in the sort of 90s.
You don't see much British porn around, do you? Apart from
like the
sort
old
of your Bonnie Blues.
The old days, yeah. My favourite fact about her was that her brother used to run her fan club, which meant that he'd spend his days sat at their kitchen table sliding photos of his naked sister into envelopes and posting them off.
Probably signing them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lipstick
probably.
kiss, surely.
He described it as a bloody odd experience, but it soon became ordinary. Which, does it really? Does that ever become ordinary?
He shared a bath with her when she was 3 years old.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Get used to anything.
yeah.
I suppose, yeah. Actually, the brother of Emma Benson Hughes, Eve Fawley, ended up writing a book about his experience running this fan club, and it was basically a book of all the fan mail that she'd received. It's called Dirty Fan Mail. It's also an audio book, and I've got a little clip from it.
Dear Mistress Louise, I am a pervert. I love to be dominated by beautiful women like yourself. My favourite is to pay a woman to pull my nipples hard while I wank myself off, or for her to grab my balls and squeeze them until I give her more money. I would love to know what you would do to me if I walked into a room naked and you were in there with your friends. Please contact me if I'm worth it. Yours sincerely, Paul.
I love that he's done it in a sort of 1970s BBC voice.
It's a great choice of narrator.
Yeah.
That's
I think it's him. I think it is
Really?
the brother.
Oh, that's him. Oh, God.
Yeah.
So he's sort of made a career out of. He sounds like a great
He's
guy.
actually, I was looking at pictures of him. He's very sort of trendy. He runs a record label and is a radio DJ.
Oh, right, okay.
Does specialise in film music.
Wears many hats,
Yeah.
like Kieran.
And in a way, you both started out in porn.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah.
Kindred spirits.
Didn't Gold as well? He's Anne Summers, isn't he? Or his daughter.
Yes. They made an awful lot of money.
Yeah. So both of them came from that background, Gold and Sullivan. Is that basically how they knew each other? From the sort of like sex toy and.
I think so, yeah. That's how they.
Yeah, and of
operate
course
in the same world.
they were quite visionary in the sense that they recruited Karen Brady when she was 23, 24 to become the first female chief executive in football, and she's gone on to have a very successful career. What they saw in her in terms of her ability to manage the club was quite transformative, and we can have a giggle about them, but at the same time they were forward looking in that regards.
Yeah. Well, I've got one who's much more old school than that up next. So we're back in the 90s again, when your best hope as a fan is that some cigar-puffing used car salesman will rock up with a wheelbarrow full of cash. And that is almost exactly what happened to Darlington in 1999, when the frankly unhinged local businessman George Reynolds took over. So Reynolds, he was a former career criminal who his main crime was basically that he would blow open the safes in shops using explosives.
Old school as
Yeah,
well.
don't make him like that anymore either, do they? And so that he'd done 3 stints behind bars for this trick. But after that, he had reformed, and he then launched a kitchen cabinets business that had gone stratospheric. So apparently he'd amassed 260 million, which seems like a lot for kitchen cabinets, but you know, it's the 90s.
Before the days of IKEA.
Yeah. So he'd really sort of having been this like safe cracker, he'd really gone up in the world, and he was now living next door to the Spice Girls, not in Darlington, but I guess in like Primrose Hill in London or something. But he was up in Darlington a lot, and eventually decided he was going to spread the wealth and take over the club. And like they all do, he promised Premier League football and a 25,000 seater stadium, which was pretty bold because they were averaging 2,000 attendances. I actually looked, the population of Darlington was about 100,000 at the time, so he was proposing 1 in 4 of all locals to come and sit in the stadium every 2 weeks. Which
there's a saying, build it and they will come. So he decided to put that into practice.
Yeah, and to be fair to him, he did build it.
He did.
Not many of them came, but he spent 20 million building this brand new ground, which was pretty impressive. Apparently there were marble self-flushing bogs and gold-plated taps. Couldn't find any pictures of them.
It's a very nice kitchen cabinet.
Yeah, I was going to say he could probably get a good deal on them. And of course, he named it the Reynolds Arena, and why not? So his stock was really high at this point. Like, obviously Darlington fans were very excited. They got their new stadium, but he actually was invited on the Oprah Winfrey show, where he was hailed as the world's best boss, because basically in his kitchens business, they'd had a really good year, and he'd given all these employees these amazing bonuses. So he paid off all their mortgages and bought them each a brand new 30 grand Mercedes.
Wow.
So he was a generous guy, spread the wealth around. Apparently when he was on Oprah, as soon as the interview started, the producers couldn't understand him, so they cut to an ad break, and when it came back, he had subtitles. They just couldn't get past the accent. But there's pictures of him online with Oprah. Apparently she absolutely loved him. And, riding high on his new sort of Hollywood level fame, George returned to Darlington and started to enact his plan to get them into the Premier League. So first he tried to sign Gaza. This is sort of Middlesbrough era Gaza, I guess. So not sure he would have done them many favours. That fell through, and then he decided to bring another Northeast legend to the club, Tino Asprilla. We did an episode on Tino Asprilla, and I think we talked about this, but it was agreed. He paraded him in front of the fans. I don't know if Tino was in his iconic fur coat.
I think he was, yeah.
Pretty much always wore it when he was in the Northeast. He's from Colombia. Anyway, Tino then got very cold feet at the last minute and fled straight from the stadium to the airport and did a runner.
Was it just taking a look at this 25,000 seater stadium with 1,500 people in it?
Yeah. I guess that will slightly, you don't want a 25,000 seater stadium if it's going to be empty all the time. Yeah, probably put him off a little bit. Not long after that, the bills started to pile up. 20 million's a lot for a stadium. And soon the club went into administration, at which point the story takes a negative turn for George Reynolds. And at this point, the Northern Echo, the local paper, start getting, this is a big story, and they start getting quite on George's case. And George has a very frank conversation with the editor, Peter Barron, who's quite a legendary newspaper editor, and he's hammering George with negative coverage. So Reynolds decides, if you're going to write headlines about me, I'm going to write headlines about you. And he erects an enormous billboard at the Reynolds Arena where he really goes for Peter Barron. So each week he has a different headline slagging off this troublesome local news editor. The first one is "Sack Barron." Next week, Barron is a liar. And then finally, Barron is gay, which I'm not exactly sure what he's hoping to achieve with that. Anyway, you'd assume that most people have seen these billboards themselves, but he decides at this point that he needs to go and inform the Barron family what a lowlife that Peter is. So George Reynolds is spotted turning up at Peter Barron's house and screaming obscenities through the letterbox, which, to be honest, could be quite scary and unpleasant, except for the fact that the Barron family were away on holiday. So, it's just the neighbours who see it. It's like kitchen cabinet magnate just screaming through the letterbox of an empty house. So you can see what direction it's going for George Reynolds. And then in 2004, the game is finally up. He's pulled over by police who search the car and find a suitcase in the boot containing 500 grand in cash, which is deemed to relate to some tax evasion. And pretty soon, George Reynolds has lost all his money and he's back in the slammer. So it's a rags to riches to rags.
Yeah. So that was his set. He'd been in the slammer before.
Yeah. I think it was his fourth stint inside. So the club then ended up in the National League. They went fully back to the bottom of the pyramid for a bit, didn't they? Yeah. Further from the Premier League than ever. And then now I think in the National League.
National League North?
National League North, so we're talking sixth tier.
Yeah.
Sixth tier. So yeah, a bit far away from their dream. The stadium is a bit of a white elephant, I was looking. So it fell into the hands of Doncaster Rugby Union Club, who played there for a bit, but they're getting crowds of like 1,500 people. But yeah,
you could kind of see that coming. Like, don't build a 25,000 seater stadium if you've got 2,000 coming each week.
Yeah, and you've got 100,000 residents.
Yeah.
I didn't think they tried to sort of sell it to be a shopping centre and all the rest, but I checked. It's now a concert venue. So Elton John played it in 2017. And he filled it, in fairness.
I think people have probably heard of Elton John,
Yeah.
whereas a National League North
Yeah.
centre forward isn't going to quite do the same thing.
Tino Espria, you think maybe would fill it? I think he might have got sort of 6,000 or 7,000. They mainly came to see the marble self-flushing bogs, the gold-plated taps. I reckon 20 years on, actually, the gold-plated taps probably don't look what they were.
Yeah.
Probably a bit green. But yeah, I think the rugby team, I don't know if they don't play there anymore, but they did for a while. They do okay, the rugby team.
Yeah, I think it certainly is still being used for sporting activity. And
Elton John gigs.
Exactly.
As for George Reynolds, he does get out the slammer in the end, and he lived out his days running an e-cig shop in Durham, where he told a journalist, cigarettes are horrible, but this isn't smoking. This is like boiling the kettle. So he actually died during COVID, but I saw when he died on Facebook, there were some locals sort of remembering him, and he's remembered quite fondly by a lot of people, probably not football fans. But apparently he's one of these guys, you go into the shop and he just regale you with story, and he had amazing stories, as you can imagine, from a former safe cracker who was mates with Oprah.
That's a really good story, actually. Just his whole trajectory.
Yeah, I think
he's paying off his employees' mortgages as well. It's going to get you a lot of goodwill.
Yeah, do we think was he a villain? I think at the end of this we'll pick our favourite, our hero and our villain of the whole thing. And I don't know exactly how to categorise him.
He did more good for more people. Let's face it, if you're breaking into banks.
Victimless crime.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it was actually shops.
Oh, right.
I might have that wrong, though. Hopefully
it satisfies the Robin Hood
element.
element.
It depends which shops.
Yeah.
If they're conglomerates, go for it.
Well, I think as that story and this episode has proven, it takes a lot to be banned from owning a football club. But that is an accolade that belongs to Mr. Lawrence Bassini, the one-time owner of Watford. So he'd actually already been declared bankrupt once before he bought them in 2011. And during that bankruptcy, he'd decided to change his name, his surname from Bassini with a Z to Bassini with 2 S's, which he said was because he wanted a fresh start.
I bet he
and
did.
Was definitely nothing to do with not wanting to come up on the dishonesty register at company's house.
Yeah, there's always something a bit suspicious about people with an alias.
Yeah. So he's only in charge of Watford for less than a year, but it's an absolute disaster. He drives them to the brink of bankruptcy, takes out these massive loans that he can't pay back. And it gets to the point where the club staff refuse to give him the key to the club safe. Don't know what he wanted to get out of the club safe. Cash, I suppose. Which begs the question, where was that cash going?
Yeah, what for?
Some
cash in hand activities.
And it can be a lot of cash as well, because if you go back to when this took place, which was 2012, we didn't have contactless in those days. So therefore, for a walk-up match, or for a regular match, you might have 3,000 walk-ups from Watford. You might, if you've got something like Borough come to town, or there's plenty of big clubs in the Championship, you might have another couple of thousand, 5,000 people paying £20 a pop because you didn't have to get your tickets in advance. There's £100,000 in the safe. And by all accounts, Lawrence came into the club secretary's office, because what you do during the course of the match is you physically count how much has come from each turnstile, reconcile, do all the boring auditing stuff, and then banks aren't open on a Saturday afternoon, so you have to wait till the Monday morning. That's why clubs have a safe. So this money was put in there. Lawrence, by all accounts, arrives looking quite agitated. He's looking quite agitated and demands of the club secretary, I want the contents of the safe. And she says, sorry, my legal fiduciary duties prevent me from doing so. He then says, I'm the owner of the club. If you don't give me the cash, I'm going to sack you and you're going to lose your job. And to be fair to this woman, she said, I'm from Watford. I've supported Watford. I do not think this is in the best interests of the club. And she refuses to give him the combination. And he then runs out of the ground. And it did seem very strange. But if you owe somebody money, why can't you go and pay them with a cheque? What type of industries do sort of say where checks aren't acceptable?
Yeah. What could he have needed that money for? Big question,
so
really.
He doesn't get the money?
He doesn't
get the money.
Doesn't get the money, and he calls the police to try and get this woman removed from the stadium.
What 999?
I guess so, yeah.
Or,
Yeah,
hello,
yeah.
my club secretary is... Yeah.
He's refusing to give me 100 grand in
Is
cash.
it technically his money? No.
No, it belongs to the company because
Yeah.
the company has sold the tickets. So unless he's paying himself a dividend or perhaps he had some expenses that he needed repaying.
Urgent expenses.
Urgent expenses, yeah.
Yeah. He sells the club shortly after that. Doesn't like these, workers, his employees standing up to him. And when he sells them, he actually owed the club $1.5 million in cash advances.
From the safe.
Probably. But the financial regulators told Watford at that point that they were unlikely to get that back from him.
How much did he buy the club for? Do you know?
Wasn't that much? It was like 400 grand or something, I think.
Right. So I was
I
wondering,
think they were in a bit of a state.
does anyone
before
really
that
know
even.
where his money came from to get it in the first place?
I think it might have come from the family.
Right, yeah. He has that vibe.
Yeah,
He's a bit of a Fredo Corleone sort of character.
Yeah. But after that, he leaves owing Watford all this money, which results in him getting banned from owning football clubs for 3 years. Obviously, he takes that well, very maturely, which is why a couple of years later, when Watford lose the playoff final to Crystal Palace, he decides to send in a string of gloating texts to the Watford Observer. So I'll just read them out. How is the feeling in the town now? Ask Anthony, who's the sports editor, because for me, the feeling is amazing. What goes around comes around. This is my happiest memory of Watford. And then he follows up with another text. Print this in the paper. I have to go now and open the champagne. All my love to Watford.
Was he even annoyed with them for Watford not?
I think they'd been offering probably quite fair coverage of his reign previously. He'd actually, there was another story. They kept on using this photograph of him. Whenever there was a story about him, they kept on using this photo of him in a red builder's hat. And he sent another, like an angry phone call to the newspaper to be like, stop using this photo of me. And they then, in response, did a poll asking their readers which photo they wanted. It was obviously the red.
I think they sold those hats in the club shop.
Did they?
It became very
so
iconic
good,
as well. The club did very much as a sense of humour.
That's great.
So anyway, Lawrence is banned from owning a club. So he does what any self-respecting sleazebag businessman would and heads to Thailand. And, after a few days of exploring the Wat Phra Singh temple and hunting down Bangkok's best Massaman curry, he decides to sample another of the local specialities, ladyboys. And Lawrence also decides, why not, to film the encounter. And unfortunately for him, it leaks out. And
I have seen it.
I've also seen it as part of for research purposes.
Yeah, it's
we do have a link which we could watch. Maybe I'll put it to Kieran if you...
Perhaps if you don't mind. Once seen, never forgotten. Don't need to return.
It's available online if you wish to find it for yourselves.
It is seared into my memory.
So he's like filming it himself, and then he must send it to someone.
Yeah,
he must have sent it to people. I don't know.
Yeah,
he probably was showing off.
Yeah, that's sort of his vibe.
Yeah. Well, if you've seen the tape, then I can tell you he's not got much to show off about.
I mean, that is true.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
He needs your contraption from that Brighton shot.
Yeah. After that sort of scandal, I guess you could call it.
Was it a scandal? Because it eventually makes the way to fans. I think I remember it being a thing on Twitter.
I guess
it's gleeful Watford fans.
It's just a comedy moment, really.
It's your dream of your hated owner for something like that to happen.
It was also around the time that he was trying to get back into football. So he tried to buy Charlton and Bolton as well. And it was during that process of trying to buy Bolton that this video came out. And I mean, if Bolton fans already hadn't made their mind up about him, then...
He turned up at Bolton with a megaphone, wearing a Bolton shirt. And there was this very confused locals just watching him with all of these claims, which he was announcing through a megaphone. But he didn't make very much progress.
Fortunately, he doesn't get hold of Bolton. And he then resurfaces in 2022, claiming that he's about to buy Birmingham for 27 million, which nobody believes him, really. Like he's a bit of a fantasist, really.
He's failed to buy a few clubs.
Yeah. Nobody's really sure if he even has any money, including the hosts of TalkSport, which Lawrence is listening to Simon Jordan and Jim White slag him off, basically say that his bid for Birmingham is bollocks. And he decides to call up and goes on an absolutely bizarre rant. He claims that he's worth 235 million, is going to win the league next year with Birmingham, and then he turns on Simon Jordan.
Now you can check it for yourselves. Investments quoted 235 million in the UK, okay? Statement of assets, personal to Lawrence Bassini. Property, 5 million. That doesn't include all the shops in Oxford Street that I own. I've kept my mouth shut, okay? Set alone in the
Fantastic,
UK.
Lawrence. Are you bloody well buying Birmingham City?
Simon, no, I won't let me finish because you all mock me, make fun of me.
Well, you do it yourself, Lawrence. Come on,
No,
mate.
no,
Let's get to the money shot. This is not an audition for you to give yourself some benediction. Answer the question. Are you buying the bloody club or not?
Simon, I am buying the club. Now, let me tell you something, yeah? Right? You guys make fun of me. I'm going to say something to you.
Because it's easy to do.
Simon.
You deserve it, Lawrence.
Simon, you slagged me off with Watford, yeah? You said things
because
about me.
Because you're a buffoon at times, Lawrence.
Simon, let me finish, right? Because I want you to have this on there. You're a failed owner of a Crystal Palace. You failed
But
there.
I'm not a buffoon.
Hang on. Simon, you did a film with Kevin Spacey.
Lawrence, no, Lawrence, I'm going to stay in media.
The best bit of that is when he goes, Simon, you had a failed movie with Kevin Spacey. He's obviously got notes in front of him of jibes he can land. You can't bear it, can you, Simon?
I've got one thing in common with Lawrence Bassini is that I'm been in that studio with Simon Jordan and I've not got the ladyboy experience.
I was about to say, where's this going? We share an interest.
Yes.
I also just like that he must have called up TalkSport to try and assure Birmingham City fans that, you know, I've got the funds, like this is all going to go ahead. I'm going to be a responsible owner. It couldn't have gone worse.
He's like a little boy trapped in an adult's body.
Yeah, he really is. And unsurprisingly, shortly after the deal fell through.
It's almost a shame. I'd almost like to see him.
Well, it was because we'd contacted him and he'd promised to come on The Price of Football to tell us about the plans for the club. He says, once the paperwork's signed, boys, you can have me for as long as you want. And it would have been box office. It would have been gold dust for us.
I can get him on anyway. He's got some. Maybe we should get him on.
He'd be entertaining.
He'd be a great guest.
Yeah,
he might be a little bit busy though, because I was wondering what Lawrence might be up to now, and checked out his profile on Companies House. And around the time that this Birmingham deal fell through, he opened a string of companies. I'm just going to read out the names of some of them. Bassini Spas Limited, Bassini Clothing Fashion Limited, Bassini Accessories Limited, Bassini Handbags Limited. These are all opened about 2 weeks apart from each other. Bassini Cakes Limited, Bassini Board Limited, Bassini Sweets and Chocolates Limited, Bassini Pizza Limited, Bassini Classic Cars Limited, Bassini Soup Kitchen for the Homeless and Vulnerable People Limited, Bassini's Perfumes Limited.
It goes on.
So
there's still more.
Yeah, it honestly is.
Asset finance,
chauffeuring,
entertainment,
Bassini's Bakeries Limited,
art galleries.
I think what he's trying to do is to protect the brand Bassini because he's got such an iconic name and people look up to him so much that you can understand why he wants to do that.
Some other unscrupulous businessman's trying to open a homeless soup kitchen under his name.
And they'll do cakes next. Yeah. Cakes, chauffeurs, pizzas.
Yeah. Just love that he threw in the soup kitchen for the homeless into that.
I had a look. Most of them are dormant. I think all of them. So they're sort of ideas, I guess we'd call them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Lawrence, I think it's the last one we were going to talk about. So we've those are our owners. Before we go, I thought we should choose your hero and your villain.
Well, I think it's the hero for living the football fan's dream. The guy from Suriname who played in a CONCACAF match. You've got to give him kudos for that. That's what we all want to do.
Ronnie Brunswick.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's probably my favourite as well. Before I call him my hero, I have to read up a little bit on the Suriname Civil War. Find out a bit more about what his...
based on the facts
his liberation army. But yeah, based on these facts, he's my fave, I think. I've got a soft spot for George Reynolds as well.
Same.
I think his heart was in the right place. Sadly, it didn't work out, but... Yeah, good.
He had a few stories along the way.
Yeah.
Villain?
I think purely because the video of him in Thailand is seared into my memory and I will never be able to forget it. Lawrence Bassini is my villain.
I think it's hard to beat Lawrence Bassini for villain.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking down that list and saying who would you least want as your owner, which maybe is a better way of thinking about it, he's streets ahead.
Yeah.
I'd probably even take the Bulgarian guy who shut down the team. All right, well, thanks a lot, Kieran, and we urge you as our loyal listeners to check out the Price of Football podcast if you're not already into it. It's excellent. You can hear much more of Kieran and Kevin Day navigating the sometimes opaque world of football finance with humour and colour and excitement and accuracy, I should say.
And the occasional lawsuit.
Yeah, and the occasional lawsuit, which is all part of the drama. Thanks a lot, Kieran.
Thank you so much for the invite. As a loyal listener to the Upshot, I'm absolutely made up to be here.
As are we, and thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
You're not
It's
a
been
loyal
a pleasure.
listener.
I do sometimes.
Here every week, though, aren't you?
Can't get rid of me.
All right, and thanks a lot for listening.